Welcome to the Geek to Geek podcast, where we are still searching for an opening tagline. I'm Void, and I'm here with my co-host Beej.
I am hopped up on allergy medicine, so I'm sorry for whatever you're about to listen to.
It's going to make for a good show. Today we're talking about Star Wars.
Yay!
Star Wars. Yay! Star Wars. Star Wars is... Okay, so when Beej and I started talking about doing this podcast, I told him that, well, we were trying to find a topic, right? We said, should we focus on one thing, like a narrow thing, and really find our audience that's into this one thing? And we decided, no, both of us sample a lot of popular culture and geek culture and all sorts of things. And I told him, yeah, that's true. You know, I flit from thing to thing, but I have one thing that I'm all the way into. It's like my deep dive into geekdom, and it's Star Wars. And then he said, let me show you something. And what did you show me a picture of?
Which one was it? What did I send you at that point? Was that the diorama that I set up in my window of my home office at that point? Or is that what I had sent? Because there's so many things that I tend to send, I don't actually remember which one this one was.
So I saw the diorama behind you, and I was like, you're into Star Wars. I'm into Star Wars. This is awesome. And then you said, hang on a minute, and you ran to your living room, and you sent me a picture of a life-size Yoda that you have?
Yes, I love my life-size Yoda. It was a Christmas gift from my parents right after episode 2 came out, and it is like my pride and joy. It is my precious. I love this thing.
It's so cool. I'm so jealous of your Yoda. I don't have anywhere to have my own Yoda, but I'm jealous of it anyway.
I have to keep it locked away in my home office now where I'm sitting right now. He's watching over us right now, by the way. I mean, he's giving us, good vibes. He's holding his hand out, like giving the good force to us. It's good. It's awesome. He's like just pushing light side at us. And I'm scared to keep it out in my living room a lot now that we have a cat and a dog, because I'm afraid his robes are going to get torn up. And I refuse to take it to work and put it in my office. I have a cardboard stand-up of Yoda in my office, but I will not take the actual statue, because all of these college kids, somebody's going to break it trying to mess with him, and I cannot have that. I would hate to have to beat one of my students for hurting Yoda.
Don't break your Yoda.
I cannot. I will not do that.
Pro tip, don't break your Yoda. Yeah, so that's it. We're talking about Star Wars. I don't really know exactly what we're going to talk about, because I'm sure we'll just use up our time, because I could talk about Star Wars for a long time. I have a couple ideas where to start. I mean, we could talk about our history with it.
Yeah, that would probably be the best to go. So what got you into it? I have a really long story that's like long and involved in a certain way, but what got you into this? I know mine, so I'll talk about it later. I want to know yours right now.
Okay, so I don't remember, because Star Wars has kind of always been part of my life.
Okay.
I know that my parents must have just shown me the movies when I was younger, but I remember by the time I was buying action figures and toys and stuff, so, probably like 8 to 12, that year range.
Okay.
I was buying Star Wars stuff. So I was buying, X-Wings and Y-Wings and some of the action figures too, but I was more into the ships and stuff. So really, my early memories are watching the movies. They'd already been out, because I was, when I was born and when the movies came out, like I wasn't part of the initial launch of them, but my parents made sure that I saw them. And then I grew up with the toys. Yeah, like any good parents. Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Dad. No, really, thanks. It's awesome. So I grew up with the toys. I mean, my intro was kind of merchandising in the 90s, honestly. And then from there, when I started to read and pick my own books, I've always been into Star Wars books. And I've actually read basically the entire old canon of Star Wars tie-in books, which is now called Legends, because they kind of deprecated it when Disney took over. But I read almost all of them, and there are like hundreds of books. Like, have you ever seen the list of how many books there were?
Oh, I have, and I used to try to keep up with it. I have an app on my phone I ended up deleting not long ago to keep up with the ones that I've owned and read, and it just kept expanding. I was like, I can never keep up with this, because my goal was to read all of them at one point, and I realized that is just as absurd a goal as to read every book ever written. I just cannot keep up with the number of Star Wars books that are out there that I haven't read.
So I basically did that. I basically kept up with all of them. Like, wow. I would go to the bookstore, and my first visit, I'd always check fantasy and sci-fi, but before I did that, I would go to the Star Wars section and see which ones were new, and I would get them.
Yep.
Like, I read almost all of those books. So that was my intro to them. And then by the time I was in high school was when the prequels came out.
Right.
And I was super pumped, and I loved the prequels the first time because I didn't really have any expectations. I didn't know what a good movie was at the time. It was the first Star Wars movie that came out when I was old enough to appreciate that a Star Wars movie was coming out. Then, looking back at them, I do not like the prequels that much, but I still love the books. I still love the universe. I played probably every Star Wars video game that there is, maybe not some of the very older ones, but I've consumed as much as Star Wars media as I could. So I was so excited when Episode 7 came out, and it's just like, it's totally reinvigorated like my love of the series. That's my quick overview. How about you?
Mine's pretty close, actually. I do have a specific moment, though, that I remember getting into it, because mine's pretty much the same way with being in high school and when Episode 1 came out, that I read so many of the Legends novels, and that was pretty much all I read for, however old I was when I found my first one, 5th, 6th grade, whatever, and just continued past there with the toys, all of this coming around. But what got me more than anything into Star Wars was I was born in 1983. I was born in January of 1983, and my parents have always told me that I was in the theater during the initial release of Return of the Jedi, that I was 5 months old, and they brought me to the movie because my dad and mom wanted to see this movie so badly. So I know that I can say that I was there. I obviously have no memory of it, but I know that I was there. And so when I was younger, my parents had a party. They had this get together and had a lot of people together, and during this time, at that point, I was old enough that all of us kids would just hang out together. Their friends would bring their kids over, and we would just hang out all night long. And I remember my parents rented a movie, and they put us in front of the TV, and we're watching it, playing with our toys, doing like kids do. I noticed that Princess Leia had a nose job, and I was watching it, and Darth Vader was doing this, talking about Princess Leia's nose, and I thought it was hilarious about Princess Leia having her nose shaved off. I didn't know at the time I was watching Spaceballs. I didn't know that this wasn't Star Wars. I was that young that I have no idea what this movie was. I just knew that it was funny, it was Star Wars, it was space, and it was awesome. And I'd seen the Star Wars movies before, but I didn't remember this scene. So I wanted to see it again, the next summer, 2 summers later, however old I was, however old you are when your parents go to work, when you're on summer break and you're left at home alone. Okay. And that summer, I decided I wanted to see that scene again and watch that Star Wars movie. And so I watched the Star Wars movie that we had dubbed off on VHS, recorded from like when we rented it at the time. My parents had the home video like dubbed on with handwritten Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi on it. And so I go through and I watch these 3 movies. Of course, I see Episode 4 come on, and I'm like, okay, I'm watching this, reading it. I don't see the scene that I'm looking for. So I obviously think to myself, in my like 8 to 10 year old brain here, I'm assuming I'm that old, and I see, well, that has to be in Episode 1, 2, or 3 then. If this is Episode 4 when we start, 1, 2, and 3 has to be where Princess Leia had her nose job. So I then go through every VHS tape that we have over that summer, fast forward, and we have shelves of these, and these are running like 8 to 12 hours long at this point.
Oh, man.
And so that summer, what I did was either watch the Star Wars movies or go through on fast forward watching every single tape that my parents and I owned, looking for Episodes 1, 2, and 3. And I could not find them. This is like 1991 to 93, at least 6 years before before Episode 1 actually came out. And so I get so disappointed in this that I can't find it. Obviously, we didn't have Spaceballs taped off either, and I never found it. And I was so upset. So when I found out that Episode 1 was coming out in 99, the years before that, I was already so into Star Wars from basically obsessively watching them frame by frame, wondering how in the world I missed this one scene, that I just forced myself to be invested in it and love it so much that I'd already started basically film study, trying to figure out why in the world I was missing these movies that as a small child. So ever since then, I've been pretty much literally obsessed with Star Wars since it took up that entire summer. That was all I did.
Okay, so I need to know, when did you actually figure out that it was Spaceballs?
It was probably a good 3 or 4 years later when I was in high school that I knew that it was Spaceballs. It was when I had Spaceballs on DVD. It was after I already had a DVD player when I realized that all of this stuff, that it was actually Spaceballs I was watching. That is embarrassing to admit, but yeah, I was probably 14 or 15 years old.
Wow. Yeah, and if you guys don't know, Spaceballs is a parody of Star Wars, and it's very, very obviously a parody.
Very much. Done by Mel Brooks. If you haven't watched it, you guys should probably go watch it, and maybe you'll become obsessed with Star Wars too. They're making a Spaceballs sequel, I heard. Haven't read much more about it, but they're supposed to be making a, like the Schwartz Awakens is what I think I heard it was called.
Oh no, I don't know how I feel about that. I don't even know if the old one has aged very well.
I refuse to watch it because I don't know, and I actually have fond memories of it because of that. So it's one of those I don't want to watch again because some Mel Brooks movies don't hold up for me, and some of them are brilliant, and I don't want to know.
You're probably better off leaving it to nostalgia. Just remember it the way it is in your mind and never go back.
Exactly.
So what do you actually think about the prequels, now that we know that you thought that you had watched them and then you actually found out later? What did you think? I mean, we don't have to dwell on the prequels because I know there are very strong feelings about it, but overall,
I loved them when they came out. Like you said, I was in high school when I was 16 years old when episode 1 came out. I skipped school that day. I told my teachers I was leaving, that I wasn't coming to school, and I held their place in line and bought their tickets because I waited in line for them all day. When school let out, they came and gave me their money for their tickets that I'd already bought for them. These are like my high school math teachers and English teachers and stuff. It was awesome. And so I watched it and I loved it. Oh my God, I loved it so much. It was the best thing in the entire world. I watched it so many times. Episode 2 and 3, the exact same way. You know, I was in college, 2003 and 2005, I think. I loved these movies. Like, I adored them. And then years later, over the years, I've watched them over and over again. I just keep going like, man, those are not very good. And then I rewatched all of them with Jennifer for the first time before The Force Awakens came out. And they're really bad. Like, I just cannot, they're not interesting for me to watch anymore. And that makes me so sad. I see good things in them, but then the execution just kind of fell off.
I feel the same way generally. There are things in them that are impressive. Like, if you've ever looked at the technology that they had to invent to be able to do what they did with episode 1. It's amazing. Absolutely. It basically took our filmmaking forward into a completely new era of CG, which is just, it's amazing. Like, ILM does crazy work, Industrial Lights Magic, and that was one of the things that just pushed us forward, like, as an industry to what we are today. And you can't diminish that.
No.
But the movies themselves, the script, the dialogue, it's so bad. I mean, you can isolate a couple action scenes that are still good, still worth watching. And, you know, it's good to know the overall story because it does tie into the rest. It's canon.
Right.
But they're not great. Like, I can't sit down and just watch them for fun. You know, I rewatched them with my wife right before we saw episode 7, and we made fun of them the whole time. That was the only way we could get through them, honestly.
That's the same thing that we did with episode 2 especially. That was the one that we made the fun of the most because that, as Jennifer put it, there was no story there. It was just a bunch of scenes of Obi-Wan going and doing these just random things. And that was kind of the way we felt about them. And
to be fair, you do learn some things about sand by watching that movie.
What do you mean?
Well, it's coarse. You know, it's rough. It gets everywhere.
It does. It gets everywhere. That is true. Thank you for that. But you can't. Going back to what you said about ILM and the technology, I realized just how much better episode 1 was from a production standpoint recently when my friend Austin looked through the visual dictionaries that I had, and episode 1 had so much more content in it that they created so much more for the world of episode 1 because it was this first one that they did, that they had to do all of this new stuff, that they were figuring out what they could do, that when episode 2 came around, it wasn't anywhere nearly as rich, that when we were looking through them, the visual dictionary of the props and the things that they were world building with, it was nowhere near as complete. And I have no idea about episode 3 because I don't have that one, but I know looking at the first 2, it was really crazy on the amount of effort they put in on episode 1 compared to the others.
Yeah, I think what they figured out, they really revolutionized CG technology in episode 1, and then they learned that there's all this stuff that they can now do with CG, and George Lucas loved it because he can play with everything in post-production that way and make everything exactly the way that he wants it without anybody else being able to come in and edit him, which honestly, he needs a good editor. He needs people over him to contradict him, and he doesn't have that anymore, which is why I'm glad that it moved to Disney. Like, I like the direction that it went.
I do
but
too.
Because of that, episode 2 and 3 have all of this green screen, all of this blue scene. If you ever see behind the scenes photos of the production, it's like little set pieces with tons of blue or tons of green behind it.
Yep.
And everything else is done in post. And it has such a different feel because of it.
It does. And I think that J.J. Abrams in episode 7 made the absolute right choice to be able to do it with a lot of practical effects that way. I mean, I'm all about computer generating graphics whenever you need to and whenever you can. And whenever that's what you can do. But I like practical effects. I mean, I like puppets and things like that. I like Muppets and I love Farscape, for goodness sake. I mean, I love just real things that feel real.
Yeah, I could tell when they were coming out with kind of the preview footage, all the teaser stuff for episode 7, you could see that they were using practical effects everywhere that they could. Like CG is still great when you use it correctly.
Yes.
And they did. There's tons of CG all throughout The Force Awakens, but they used so much practical stuff.
And they knew how to put it together, that the seams blurred a lot more because they knew to make the CG look more like a practical effect rather than making it look like CG on purpose, kind of like the Warcraft movie is doing on purpose. It looks like a video game when it's coming out.
Yeah, exactly. And I love the fact that BB-8 is practical. I mean, I know that he's CG in some scenes, but for the most part, BB-8 is there. Like, he's practical. He's on set. He rolls around like that, He interacts with the actors. It's amazing. I can't believe that they did that.
It is amazing. I mean, I have one of the cheap, not cheap, but I have one of the Target BB-8s that Jennifer got me for Christmas, and just being able to roll around with my own basically pet droid here that beeps and makes noises is astonishing that technology exists, because even in my living room floor, it looks and feels like magic. It is fantastic. It's the kind of magic that you don't feel from even a radio-controlled car or a drone or something like that. That it being BB-8, I feel like BB is in my house, and I love it.
I've played around with those. Those are really cool. Those are fun. But I guess I should just say that, like, episode 7 in general, I loved it. I thought it was great. Did you like it?
I have seen it 5 times now. And I love it. Like, I can't speak highly enough of it. It is definitely not a perfect film. Like, there's no way that I would claim that, like, it's the best movie ever made or anything. But I think in terms of these Star Wars movies, I do think it is the one I would tell new people to watch, because it is the best. It is the most technically well made in terms of pacing, in terms of storyline and being engaging and things like that. That if you're a newcomer, especially if you watch it, if you don't like episode 7, then you're probably not going to like the others. And there's a lot of people who have seen episode 4 and don't particularly care for it, who I know that they've liked this new one. It feels like a modern movie, but it looks and has that kind of aesthetic of the old ones. It's like, I don't know, I think that they did such a good job making it feel like a Star Wars movie that I can't not want other people to watch it and enjoy it like that. This is my I don't know if it's the best of the Star Wars movies, but it's the best made, and it's probably my favorite at this point.
I think it's actually my favorite too, which is really surprising that it could topple the classics. But I mean, like you were saying, it has the modern pacing, which makes a world of difference, and with the modern technology and blending practical and CG effects. And it's like, it's finally that Star Wars that we loved from the original trilogy brought up to modern standards, which is what we thought the prequels were going to be, but they weren't.
And that's what I like the most about it, is that so many people complain that it's fan service, that so many people, George Lucas included, saying that he made this movie to appeal to the fans and the fans alone. But honestly, that it's kind of kitschy and that it is super pulpy. And to those people, I always look, and I don't ever want to get into this kind of, nerd ragey argument about it, but I always look at them and I'm like, that's what Star Wars is, though. That's what made me love it, is that it's kitschy and pulpy and just kind of that it doesn't take itself so seriously, that this movie is fun to watch. It doesn't have to be, I love that about it. It doesn't have to be more than that. And they made the movie they were trying to make. And that's something that I always respect out of a filmmaker, is that if you go in and you make the movie you set out to make, then it's a success. And this time it happened to line up with exactly what I was wanting out of it as well.
Well, and you can tell that it's made by fans, and
Yes.
I love that. Like you said, it's fan service, but not just fan service. It's actually made by fans of the original movies. The people who were watching these in the 70s and 80s are now the people who are old enough
Right.
to be the directors and the writers, like J.J. Abrams. He's a Star Wars fan first, and then he's the director and writer of Episode 7 second. And I think it shows, and it makes all the difference. He gets the material. He really gets it in a way that I think he's even, fessed up that he never really got Star Trek, even
Yep.
though he did the reboots. And when you watch those Star Trek movies, the last two, the rebooted ones, they almost have a Star Wars feel to them because J.J. Abrams is a Star Wars kid. And now he's, the executive producer for this new trilogy. And it's amazing.
And that some people think that's a bad thing, and that's fine. And I fully understand, because I love Star Trek as well. And so I fully understand the feeling changed in the new reboots. And that may be one of the reasons that I like the reboots so much of the Star Trek movies, is that they feel a little more Star Warsy, because I've always been more of a Star Wars fan than I was a Star Trek fan. Even though I've seen like almost all of the shows, I'm still just love the Star Wars universe more. And I understand the difference, but I think that's why I like them so much, is because they feel so much like Star Wars movies. And when I was watching Into Darkness, when Benedict Cumberbatch leapt over and attacked the Klingons, I was like, that's what Jedi are going to look like. I'm okay. I'm sold. When they were flying the shuttle in to and avoiding things through a chasm, I think it's been a few months since I watched it. I was like, yep, that's what the Millennium Falcon's going to look like. I'm okay with this. This is just his tryout for doing Star Wars, and I'm okay with it.
Oh, yeah, me too. I like those Star Trek reboots, but I love Star Wars. And you can tell that J.J. Abrams does too. And he kind of blended the lines there. So I'm glad that he's in the Star Wars world now. It seems like it's a better fit for him. And I'm so excited to see Episode 8. I can't wait.
I'm going crazy waiting on Episode 8. Like I thought I was going. When they delayed it again, I got really upset. Like more upset than I should have, because it's a movie. But I'm like, no, that means that there's another 6 months that I'm having to wait on the next like major Star Wars movie. And we're gonna have Rogue One coming in. And how do you feel about Rogue One? Because I'm torn. Honestly, I don't know whether or not to get excited about Rogue One.
I'm excited. I think.
Okay.
I think it has a lot of work to do, because it has to set the new bar for what an anthology movie is, because we've never had one before. So it gets to be its own thing while still being a Star Wars movie. I don't envy the job of the writer and the director, because that's such a hard place to be. Nobody has ever been in that place before. I mean, George Lucas, when he made the first Star Wars movie, he was making a new thing. And then after that, everyone has been an episode number that ties into the main series, and those all deal with the Skywalker family. This is the first movie that gets to be a spin-off that is in the universe but not directly related to the main saga, so it has to find its own way for the first time. I think it's going to be really interesting to watch how they do that. And the thing is, all I have right now is excitement, because we know almost nothing about it. The basic premise is that it's the group that went and got either found or stole or acquired the Death Star plans before Episode 4. And that's about it. I mean, they haven't released that much from the set. We don't have many teasers. I think there's 2 or 3 images out there of the cast, and that's it.
And that's actually kind of why I'm not terribly excited. I know I'm going to get excited when I actually see something that feels like old Star Wars. That's where I'm going to as Jennifer always put it. Like, whenever there was something new Star Wars, there was a new trailer or a new article with something new before Episode 7, I would be like, everybody, quiet, 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 quiet. There's new Star Wars. Nobody talk while I watch this. And I would seriously make everybody around me be completely silent because there was new Star Wars. And then it was over. And I'm like, okay, everybody's good. You're good. You're good. I've seen the new Star Wars stuff. And it's like, that's what I'm going to do with Rogue One. I know that I'm going to get that way of excited about it. But just because there's a couple of images I don't know much about it yet, I'm trying to avoid the level of craziness that I got to with Episode 7.
See, and more than anything, even if Rogue One doesn't end up being like an amazing movie, it's opening the way for the anthology films. And I think there's so much potential there. There are all of these side stories, side characters that aren't directly related to the Skywalker family that have become fan favorites or that are really interesting. And before these anthology films, the only way that you could get a fix for that kind of character is to watch the tie-ins or the spin-offs. And, you know, it's not the same kind of satisfaction as seeing it on the big screen in movie form. And this is the way that we're finally going to see more about Han Solo. I don't know how I feel about that. That's a mixed, bag of worms there. But I'm more excited for... There's the possibility, like, what if we get a Boba Fett film? Like, we don't actually know that much about Boba Fett in the new canon universe. There could be a whole movie about him. What if we finally get an Obi-Wan movie that's just Obi-Wan and it's Ewan McGregor? Do you know how amazing that could be? He's such a good actor, and he was given such bad scripts for the prequels.
If we could actually see Ewan McGregor do an Obi-Wan anthology movie, I would be all in immediately. He is my Obi-Wan. I mean, his scripts are terrible, and you are 100% spot on that. The scripts that he was handed, he did the best that he could with them, I think, because I love him in pretty much everything he's in. But he's my Obi-Wan. I think about Obi-Wan Kenobi, and it's Ewan McGregor over Alec Guinness. And I'm fairly certain I'm going to get hate mail about that from somebody, or a hate tweet at least. But it is... I see Obi-Wan as Ewan McGregor because he just feels like Obi-Wan. I don't know. It's weird. I guess I know because he likes the role and Alec Guinness kind of hated it and looked down on it. So I'm like, Ewan McGregor was like making lightsaber sounds as he's fighting. They had to edit out in post. I'm like, yeah, that's my Obi-Wan, the guy who's going zzz, 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 like I did when I was 6 years old, 33 years old, whatever.
Yeah, and I love that too. I don't know if you've ever seen the Episode 1 behind the scenes documentary. It's a very poorly made documentary. I wouldn't actually recommend watching it.
Yeah.
But in it, you can see it's just kind of like a random behind the scenes shots, and they don't really tell a good story. But you can tell that Ewan McGregor is so excited to be in Star Wars, to have his own lightsaber, to be Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
He is so into that world because he grew up with it.
Yeah.
I would love to see him given a chance to actually use his acting skills and be Obi-Wan between episodes 3 and 4 and just have his own movie. I think it could be amazing.
Oh, if he could be Clone Wars Obi-Wan, that would be fantastic. Oh, well, man.
I think, right between when he drops off Luke and when he meets Luke when Luke is in his 20s, what did he do for all those years on Tatooine?
Oh, you said between 3 and 4. For some reason I heard between 2 and 3. And yeah, if he could just be Hermit Obi-Wan like that, it would be awesome.
I think there's a lot of potential there.
There's a lot of stories that could be told like that too.
And one of the other things is in episode 7 in Rey's Force vision, you hear the voice that calls out to her that says her name. It says Rey, and it's a blend of Alex Guinness and Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan talking to her through the Force. So where's the tie-in there? Is she related to Obi-Wan instead of a Skywalker?
I'm really hoping that is... I want that to be the case way more than her being a Skywalker. To be completely honest, I don't want her to be Luke's daughter or granddaughter or anything like that. Probably not granddaughter, but I don't want her to be related to Luke in any way. I want her to be either a Kenobi or just somebody. I would love her just to be a nobody. But I know, it's a family story, so I know there's something going to be going on, but I really don't want her to be a Skywalker.
Yeah, I think there has to be a tie-in because they've mentioned, now that they are doing anthology films, people asked, what's the difference between the anthology films and the main numbered films? And they said the main numbered films are the saga of the Skywalker family, basically. Yep. So she has to have some tie-in. I think Luke being her father is the obvious choice, and I don't like it for that reason.
It. Yep.
No,
it's
I would
too
rather
easy.
it be Obi-Wan or, someone else, something else.
Yeah. Anything else, really, in my mind, I'm cool with a connection because, like we've said, that's what the story is. But I just do not like the idea of her being Luke's daughter. It just, I don't know, it just sits so. As many things that were cliche in episode 7 that I am, fully able to accept and just be like, yep, I love that. I just don't want her to be Luke's. I don't want her to be related Luke's family.
I think it's too obvious. I mean, the Star Wars movies, they really like to drop big bombs on you, big twists. And I think that her being Luke's daughter is much too obvious to actually include.
Yeah. If they actually include the I am your father part in the second movie of the second trilogy, they're going to get so much flack about it. And like, I don't know, that's one of those moments that would go down in like movie history as being one of the worst things ever. Like,
right. What would be more interesting is if she convinces herself that Luke is her father, and then he gets to tell her, I am not your father.
Yeah, I'm not. No, I'm not your dad. Leave me alone. I'm not your dad.
But dad, that's a much more interesting story. I like that they're doing things that are more interesting and aren't as easy because, like I said, I read almost all of the old tie-in novels. They now call them Legends books because they don't apply to the storyline anymore. But in that old storyline that I was very invested in for many years, Luke reforms the Jedi Order. He succeeds. The New Republic succeeds, and they move on from there. This took the same premise and flipped it. The new canon storyline, which is what episode 7 is. The New Republic was founded. Luke tried to reestablish the Jedi Order and he failed.
Yes.
How much more interesting is that than him just succeeding and having another generation of Jedi? Him failing is so much more interesting.
It is way better in terms of storytelling. Like one of the things I had read, one of the best advices, wow, I teach Englishes too. One of the best pieces of advice that I've ever got was at the end of every chapter, what can you do to make your characters' lives the worst that they can possibly be? And that's going to keep people reading. That at the end of every chapter, what is the worst thing that can happen to these people? And for Luke Skywalker, that's what it is. He becomes the last Jedi. He trains up, he defeats his father and restarts, and then he fails at it. He saves the galaxy and then fails at actually restarting something to help them. Like, that's the worst thing that you can do to Luke. It's not him dying or going over to the dark side. That's not the worst thing that can happen to Luke, because he has always been the one to succeed. The worst thing that you can do to him is make him fail. And so I'm really glad that they did that. And I'm really hoping that they keep on with that kind of, I don't even know what the word is, but that it's not a tradition yet, but with along that same path, where if he's going to end up training Rey, I am very much hoping that it's not a traditional kind of master Padawan kind of relationship, that there's something different that's going to be between them, since they're going back to the beginning of the Jedi Order at the first temple and all of that.
Yeah, and I think that it could be interesting if Rey falls to the dark side, because Luke didn't, right? He was tempted, and in second movie, third movie, he was very tempted, and then he didn't. I think if they don't want to mirror the old trilogy exactly, if they want to take the challenging story path, have Rey fall to the dark side, have Kylo Ren redeemed instead. Do a switch, flip him around. How interesting could that be?
Absolutely, because that I feel the same way. That's what I'm kind of hoping with him actually wanting to be, him talking about the whole, he feels the light side pulling at him and all of this. That's what but Rey wasn't ever tempted. That's the only thing. If they do, they haven't foreshadowed it yet in terms of her going to the dark side. Anytime something has come up, in episode 7 at least, anytime something has come up for her to fall to the dark side, she hasn't even been remotely tempted. Kind of like Leia, that she's like Leia in that Leia was never tempted to go to the dark side. She was just, doing what was right and doing the good thing throughout the entire time. And maybe they'll deal with some comics like that. That's one thing I'm actually hoping to see in either. I like the comics better than a lot of the new novels, just because I can read them more easily. So I'm kind of hoping they deal with those kinds of ideas in comics that lead up to episode 8.
So Star Wars comics, They started coming out last year from Marvel. Those are the first comics that I have ever paid money for, like my own money to buy a comic. Ever.
Wow. That is...
I read a lot of them, and I like them a lot. Have you read them?
I've read the first 6 or 7 issues of Star Wars, the Star Wars title, the first 6 or 7 issues of Vader. I loved both of those. Vader was way better than Star Wars, in my opinion. I absolutely adore Kanan. Kanan is a fantastic story to me. I love the issues of Kanan that I've read, The Last Padawan. It is so good, in my opinion. I just love it. And I started Leia, and I just didn't like it. I wanted to like Leia, and there was just something about the entire story I just could not get into. I wanted to, because I love Leia. I mean, my dog is named Princess Leia, but I just didn't like the book, and I feel bad.
That's okay. I disagree with you completely. I liked Leia a lot. I thought it was a really good 5 comic, run, and I enjoyed every one of them. So, I mean, to each their own.
Yeah.
The other ones, I agree with you, though. I think Star Wars, the main title comic, is the weakest of all the other ones, because it's trying to be so broad and cover its bases. Vader's really good, although you can already tell that they've kind of done a few initial storylines, and now they're digging into more, I don't know, they're kind of reaching for the next thing, to the point where I might be done with that one.
Oh, okay.
But I like seeing the other characters when they pull them in for like a little, 4, 5, 6 comic arc, and then it's done. It has a complete story, because they had Leia, they had Lando, and then they did Chewbacca. And I thought all of those were good.
I think I may have actually read the first issue of Lando. I don't know if I actually got to it. I was using the Marvel Unlimited app and reading what they had on there during a free month that they offered. And that was, Lando got on there, but I honestly don't know if I continued, if I read it or if I just added it to my list.
Yeah, Lando is pretty good. I just like that, it's a story that they want to tell. They tell it and then they wrap it up.
Yeah.
They don't have to keep reaching for the next thing, which is kind of where Vader is. And they don't have to dilute it down to keep it, broad enough like Star Wars. I do think that you're right with Kanan. Kanan, the Last Padawan, is really good, and it's still going on. It's still running, and it's I think it's on issue like, I don't know, 11, 13, 15, something in the, low teens maybe, but it's still good.
Good, because I love the character of Kanan, and I love the way that the story was being told in the early issues of the comic. Especially, it's just also set during a time where we don't really see we don't really see a whole lot of the other part of the universe. We don't see the seedy underbelly part of the universe right after the Clone Wars. Like, we don't know what's going on. And with him being underground at that point, I really, really like what they're doing with it.
Yeah, and it ties into Star Wars Rebels too, which is really nice, because I've been watching Rebels. Have you?
I am about halfway through season 2. I stopped right as the season actually came back, and I was waiting on it to finish because I was going to just binge all of them, because I bought the season on Amazon Prime. Since we don't have TV service, I do all my stuff through streaming, and so that was one of the seasons that I bought. And since I think it just finished up, didn't it? Did the season just end like last week maybe, or week before?
I think the finale was last night as of when we're recording this.
Okay, then yes, I am probably going to be doing that either this weekend or coming next week. That will be one of my binge days, though. I love Rebels. It's
kind of like Clone Wars in that sometimes they have a one-off episode or like a side character centric episode that isn't that great.
Yes.
But overall, the series is good. And then when you have the episodes that deal with the main like Jedi storyline, where the main characters are Kanan, Ezra, and then Ahsoka comes back from the Clone Wars, when the story is about them, it's amazing. It's so good.
Like, it is. I watched all of the Clone Wars, and I like Ahsoka 100 times better in Rebels than I ever did with her in Clone Wars. She grew on me in Clone Wars. I hated her in the first season of it, but after that, as she started to mature as a character, I started really liking the character. And when she's an adult in Rebels, she is awesome. She is fantastic, and I'm really truly nervous about the things that are going on at the end of season 2 of Rebels.
Yeah, and Clone Wars, for those of you who don't know, it's not episode 2. Clone Wars is a tie-in. It's basically like not animated, but CG show.
CG animated, yeah.
Yeah, CG animated show that they made during, it was probably like right around episode 3 is when they started it.
It was after episode 3 because the initial one came out in theaters, and it came out after, and it was the only Star Wars movie I've not seen in the theaters.
Yeah, and it tells the story of basically what happened with Anakin and Obi-Wan between episode 2 and 3, and it's all about the Clone Wars. And the main unique character that they created for it is Ahsoka Tano, who ends up being Anakin's apprentice. And like you said, she grows on you throughout the series, and she has one of the best storylines I've seen in Star Wars when you get to the end of Clone Wars. It's not till season, I can't remember if it's 5 or 6. I think it's 5.
I think it's 5 because I think it's 5.
She gets a really cool storyline where, you know, she was an apprentice, and you know that she's not his apprentice by the time episode 3 comes along. So it's not a huge spoiler to say that she leaves the Jedi Order, but it's about how she leaves the Jedi Order and why she leaves the Jedi Order. And it's a really good piece of Star Wars storytelling.
It was one of the very few times that Star Wars has legitimately made me cry.
Oh yeah, I can see that.
I love Star Wars, and it was kind of one of those moments that really took me by surprise at how much I cared about it, because I had started out not like her. Weirdly enough, I have goosebumps talking about it right now because it was emotional. I was so emotionally invested in it that I'm just thinking about it. I'm like, man, that was so. It was meaningful. It wasn't even that it was sad. It was just meaningful, and I'm just like, man, I don't ever want to be in that situation. Like I'll ever be in the situation of leaving the Jedi Order, but I'm never leaving.
I know, who would do that? But at this point, Ahsoka is like my favorite Star Wars character who's not in the movies, you know?
I still have to say that Thrawn is mine, but in terms of just from the novels. But yeah, I mean, Ahsoka is the stories and the things that they've done. She grows, like she feels like a person in these, which doesn't happen a lot from both animated series and, you know, comics and all that kind of stuff. You don't see characters who legitimately grow from one series to the next, and you see her grow up into an adult and be like, okay, they made a very conscious choice to make her character actually evolve.
And I don't know if you noticed this, because I think you watched it more when it was coming out. I didn't watch Clone Wars until right before episode 7 when I binged it all 5 seasons over the course of 1 month. But actually, yeah, I know, I watched a lot of one show over a very short amount of time. They actually age her character up throughout the series. Like her character model actually changes and grows up over the course of the series. And they don't change anybody else, but they change her. And it's really interesting to see how they kind of refine her character as she's coming into her own.
I didn't notice that.
It's really cool.
I knew that in Rebels, she has a much harder look and a much more kind of lithe and almost world-weary, like just way about her, and just the way she holds herself is different in Rebels. But I never really noticed by the end of Clone Wars, because I'd done it season by season, some here as it was coming on, that I would just watch an entire season later, that kind of thing. But I never really noticed them changing her that much.
Yeah, it's subtle, but I noticed it because I binged it that way.
That makes sense.
It was much more obvious, but it was really cool. It's really cool. I love Star Wars.
I know.
What else? What else should we talk about? We're already getting to the point where we should think about wrapping up. I don't want to stop talking about Star Wars, though. Was there anything else big that you wanted to hit?
With Star Wars stuff, it's just like the Old Republic. I'm very sad about the Old Republic right now. That every time I get into the Old Republic, I know you had a really hard time getting into it. And I absolutely adore the new story that they're telling, the Knights of the Fallen Empire. It is such a good story, but is still completely marred by the MMO mechanics that they've put into it. That the cash shop and all of this, and having to be a subscriber to actually get to it. And it's just, I don't know, the story is so good, but in between the story breaks, you still have to play that same MMO stuff that feels like I'm playing the Burning Crusade in 2006. And I don't know. It's just, I want to play it and like it. That's one that I just keep going back to. And I think about all the time. Like, I need to play this game to see this story and how it wraps up. But I just can't make myself. I don't know. I want to.
I can see that. I had a lot of trouble getting into that game too. And for me, it was because I really liked Knights of the Old Republic.
Yes.
That was a great video game. I thought Knights of the Old Republic 2, I don't think I ever really finished that, but
it's worth it.
I don't know.
I liked it.
It was okay.
It's kind of it's the B team developer, like we mentioned last week, where the Arkham game. That's the way I feel. I mean, that is what happened when Knights of the Old Republic 2 had the B team developer, but it was good. I enjoyed it. They pretty much ignore a lot of the stuff that happened in it for the Old Republic for the MMO, but it all works out in terms of, you know, it's worth your time to go through.
So my problem was I just wanted it to be a single player RPG. I wanted it to be Knights of the Old Republic 3.
Yeah.
And instead, they tried to cram how much content worth into it? I think they said that it's more like Knights of the Old Republic 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in one game. Except they wrapped it in all of the MMO mechanics that I'm so over that I don't ever want to play again.
And that's the entire problem. Every patch that they come out with for that game, you have fantastic Star Wars story. It's very hard to find bad class story where you're a Jedi Knight, that kind of class. Those are very good stories. But then you have the planetary stories and things like that that are not very nearly as interesting. Some of them are. And you get it marred by having to go and play an MMO between them. And every patch, they do something to make it easier to solo and easier to play alone, but it's like playing an MMO alone. It's not like playing a cool single-player game between cutscenes. It's like you're playing a weird old MMO between cutscenes, and it's not nearly as good as playing an actual single player game, even if they've moved the MMO mechanics to be accommodating for single player.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't even talked about any of the other Star Wars video games. Okay,
no.
This is not going to be the last Star Wars podcast. We both love it. It will come up again. We need to start wrapping up our main topic, though. Oh, it hurts me to say that. I could talk about Star Wars forever.
I know.
Okay, let's get over to our weekly geekery. This week I have Factorio, which is a game you can get on Steam. It doesn't look like much, and I wasn't going to buy it for myself because it really did not impress me when I looked at it. My brother bought it for me, and he said, "We're playing this, get online." So I did, and then I emerged like 7 hours later. Like I don't know what happened. It just grabbed us. It's kind of like Minecraft, very vaguely, in that you start out and you have to gather a little bit of wood, gather a little bit of coal, craft a couple things at the beginning, but that's where it starts. After that, the entire game is automating like one tech level below you. So the very first thing you do, grab some wood, grab some coal, whatever. The next thing you're going to do is set up some automated miners to mine coal for you. And then you're going to start building some conveyor belts and moving materials around. You're going to go take that coal and put it into a furnace to, smelt some iron or some copper. And you slowly start tying these things together. Like, you can always manually craft things one-off, but instead what you do is you set up these giant processes where arms pick up this material from here, drop it on a conveyor belt. Your conveyor belt takes it somewhere else and drops it into another machine that turns it into whatever. And suddenly 7 hours have gone by and you have this giant factory and you're completely obsessed. At least that's what happened to me. So, Factorio. That's my weekly geekery. Check it out on Steam. I think it's about $15 or $20, but it's so worth it. And it's multiplayer. We played multiplayer, making a factory together. It was amazing. And
my weekly geekery is actually the Marvel Unlimited app. It is basically Netflix for Marvel Comics at $10 a month. This is how I've read most of the comics that I've read lately, actually. They will send out occasional emails and give free months as things are coming up, as big Marvel or products are coming out. And they did it for the Star Wars release when the new Star Wars comics went onto the app. They did it for something else last year that I got a free month out of that ended up making me subscribe for a few months. And I'm almost certain they're going to do it before the Civil War release as well, to send out to people who have Marvel Unlimited accounts, whether you're subscribers or not, to give free accounts to. So you go in, you download it on your phone, and you can read pretty much the entire backlog of Marvel comics from the 60s to now on your phone or your tablet, or on, I think you can do it on your computer. I'm not sure about that, but on your phone or your tablet, on Android or iOS. And they do it by curated storyline. So with Civil War coming up, let's say, you can just go and read every Civil War comic that came out that they've based the new movie on and be completely caught up. And they stay about 6 months behind on current run comics. But if you subscribe for a month or two and then let it sit for a month or two, you get another, basically a queue set up of things that are getting put back on there. And it is awesome to be able to just get on, read some comics, especially when they do the free month. And that's how I've gotten all of my comics lately. And with the Star Wars comics on there now, I could not have this as be my geekery, because that is why I stayed subscribed to it for an extra month, was to get through the storylines that were on there and read Vader and Star Wars and Kanan and just see all of it there. It is a fantastic app. The app itself is free. They always have free comics. Try it out. See if you like reading comics on your phone or your tablet. It's awesome. The Marvel Unlimited app. It is different, however, from the Marvel app. Make sure you download the Marvel Unlimited app to get the subscription service for digital comics.
That's cool. I totally second that. I've done Marvel Unlimited before for little periods here and there where I binged on comics, and it's great.
It is fantastic for binging comics.
Yeah. What do you got for health hack?
Okay, this week's health hack is very simple. I just want you to find a buddy. I don't care if it's on Twitter, it can be in person, but for me, and I know you and I both do this, and it helps for both of us, for each other, is just having somebody to do stuff with. It's easier to go for a walk if you have a friend to be able to go out with. I'm lucky, I live with mine being my wife, and now that my ankle is healed up after the torn ligament, we can go out for walks again, and we are way more likely to do it together than we are one of us doing it on our own. So every night we'll go out and take the dog for a walk or something like that. Find a buddy to go eat at a healthy restaurant every week, and or a restaurant, and basically to look at it, be like, nah, maybe you shouldn't get the extra large fries this time, or just something like that. Just have a buddy to do stuff with, and you will be more active. Have a buddy. It is truly one of the best things you can do for your health.
Yeah, even if it's just digital. I mean, you and I do this for each other. I'll tell you that it's my run day and I don't feel like running, and you'll tell me go run, and then I will. Yep. I mean, it's just having someone there to bounce things off of and give you a little encouragement.
I had a stranger draw me a picture out of crayons on Twitter when I didn't want to go run one night. I tweeted before I went home from work and said I didn't want to go run, and they sent me an image where they had hand-drawn me a picture that was telling me to go run. And when somebody does that to you, you know what you're going to do? You're going to go run. And because somebody took that effort for you, and it was a stranger, and because it was a stranger, it meant that much more to me. And so, yeah, Twitter is wonderful. When I don't want to run or something like that, it helps a lot.
Excellent. Well, thank you for listening, everybody, for our extra long episode. I make no promises on time length of these episodes when we talk about Star Wars. Ever. You're
just lucky this was promises. Not 7 hours.
This could have been 7 hours. Think about it. Anyway, you can write to us with comments, suggestions, or feedback. Our email address, as always, is geek2geekcast@gmail.com, or reach us on Twitter @geek2geekcast. We're pretty active on there. I blog almost daily at agreenmushroom.com, and you can find me at grnmushroom. That's green mushroom without the E's on Twitter.
And I'm on Twitter as @ProfessorBeej. That's Beej with 2 E's, Beej. And I blog sporadically at geekfitness.net and on Instagram as @geekfitness_. We also have our Instagram that I'm trying to figure out as @geek2geekcast. So follow us on Instagram as well and teach me how to do pictures.
Everything is basically Geek to Geek Cast. You can find us if you try.
Yep.
We've been Void and Beej with your Geek to Geek podcast. And actually, with the permission of an awesome artist that I reached out to, Carbohydro M, we finally have some outro music. So see you next week, geeks.
Bye.